All right, this week we're going to be talking about television. Yay, everything I'm sure that you've been watching a lot of lately, being stuck at home. We're going to analyze television because it's a little bit different than movie structure. We've looked at movie structure, we've looked at play structure, and television is just a little bit different because of its audience, because of commercials, because of the way that it's constructed. In just its format. So let's look. Basically, you have two different types of shows. You have half-hour shows and one-hour shows. The half-hour shows are organized in a three-act structure with a teaser and a tag. The teaser is at the beginning. It sort of, I don't know, makes you interested in the show, makes you want to get in there. It's the hook. Then you have that three-act structure, and then at the end, sometimes you have a tag. A tag is a little funny moment that's not really related to the show itself and plot line. It's just related to maybe the characters and to show a little bit of characterization at the end, just to be funny and sort of offbeat. The three acts are set around commercial breaks. So you'd have time for someone to go get something from the refrigerator or something like that. And this is kind of old style because a lot of times now we have recorded television, or we watch off Netflix and so forth. We don't have commercials, but the television industry is a little slow to catch up to that. And so you'll still find the three-act structure even though you don't have a commercial break in a show. The other type that you'll find is one-hour shows, and they vary by the amount of acts that they have depending on how they want to structure it. It can be 4, 5, or 6 acts. Sometimes one-hour shows have commercial breaks as well, and you can see that in the structure. But as we watch differently now in our modern audience, this is changing because we tend to sit down and binge watch rather than waiting from week to week for a show to come on. All right, so let's look at the difference between film and television as far as story setup. In film, you're going to set up for that resolution to be at the end of that 2-hour sitting or hour and a half sitting. It's self-contained. Even in franchises, you still have sort of a self-contained plot line. Which is that sort of traditional three-act structure. And television, the whole point of it is to keep you interested after the television show is over. It's to keep going, to keep making more. A lot of times they'll have a pilot. They'll show the pilot to the producers of the TV networks or so forth, and then they'll decide whether they want to go forth from there. Once you get the pilot, then oh yay, we get one season. And so you can do one season. And at the end of that season, you're hoping that you'll get renewed again. And after that season, you're hoping that you'll get renewed again. So you got to keep making good content. And it's a constant battle to basically keep going in that show. If you get to the 100 episode mark, then you are able to be eligible for syndication. That means that you can be picked up by any network. So if it's a show that was made for ABC, sort of a Disney oriented show, but then it passed that 100 episode mark, could be sold to other networks and they could show it. That's how you find episodes of like Seinfeld or Friends running on TBS and things like that. So they've been picked up by other networks. The thing about television, which is nice, is it gives you a lot more room to create a lot longer and a lot more expansive universe. Something like Lemony Snicket's Series of Unfortunate Events. That's nicely done as a television show because it's like a 13 book series. And there's a lot there to pull from. So it kind of becomes either, if you're going to do a movie, then you have to go, oh, well, we'll have to do sequels to the movie, and what if the actors get too old and so forth. So it kind of makes up for if you have a longer work you want to focus on. Now, the script for television is very complicated, and I'm going to give you a very, very brief understanding of it. I will not expect you to write anything in television script format because it is a lot different. You start up here with the the page number and what's called a cold open. That means that it opens into the scene and it shows you it's the interior of a courtroom. It's a flashback. It takes place during the day. And then it goes into a little, and all of this goes into like camera, how the camera's going to be set up in there. And the writer's working a lot more closely with the cameramen. They're working oftentimes on set with the actors as they're doing things, which sometimes happens in a movie, but sometimes doesn't. And the screenwriter doesn't really have a lot of say-so after the script leaves their hands. And in television, a lot of times the television writers are working together. They're working in a group. It's not really just one writer. It's a group of writers, and they're working very close to the cameramen. They're working very close with the actors and so forth. And so it's all very collaborative process, and the script reflects that. All right, let's look at the type of TV series a little more closely. So in half hours, you have the single cam and the multicam shows. The difference between the two is that single cam is not in one set location. You have a single camera, basically, and it goes around, even if there are multiple cameras, which most likely there are. They're free-moving cameras. They're sort of following people through the locations and changing locations and so forth. Almost more like a movie set than, well, like a movie that's that's shot in multiple locations. Examples of this would be The Office, Shameless, Malcolm in the Middle. There's a lot of shows that use that sort of format, as opposed to multicam, which is on a soundstage. And you know what this feels like when you watch it, because a lot of times this is set in front of a live audience, or it's set in front of canned laughter. If you think about those shows, those Disney shows, a lot of times that are live action Disney shows, the characters in there would have had, they say something funny or they fall on the ground, and you hear the laugh track come through. There is a home of the show, which is oftentimes in somebody's house, or think of like the Cosby Show. It's like in Cosby's house, something like that. It doesn't go a lot of other places. It almost feels a little bit more like a stage play. And it's called multicam because you have the camera set up in the room to sort of pan around the action and take it from different cuts, from different angles. Okay, half-hour shows. You also have a sort of how their genre is considered. A sitcom is a situational comedy. That's what that stands for. It's sort of like that hangout comedy where we're just going to hang out with these people and chill with them for the week. It's a dilemma of the week. Here's this thing that's going to happen, and they got to overcome it. It's funny or whatever that's going to go with it. Serialized is more like it's episodic. So it goes from the storyline goes from show to show. It doesn't stop at the end of the show. A lot of times sitcoms have something that's going through the whole thing. Like in Friends, it's the relationship between a couple of different characters, and maybe that's the entire season that goes through. But each individual show has its own little thing. It can almost stand by itself. You can watch it from beginning to end, and it's almost like a little movie or a little episode within itself. And you don't have to watch them in order. Whereas serialized, you need to watch them in order to get the point of the show. You can have sort of a hybrid where they sort of stand by themselves, but they sort of work better in the larger frame of sort of almost like serialized from show to show to show. 1 hours are some of the same type of elements. Procedural, a lot of times you find that. Call that the case of the week kind of shows, like your sort of crime dramas or your NCISs, where they're following a murderer and they got to find out who did it and that kind of thing. As opposed to what is more common, which is the serialized type of shows. For 1 hour shows are generally serialized, like Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad. A hybrid, you sometimes find these mixed as well, where they can sort of stand by themselves, but they have elements that go with the serialized show. Within pilots, and pilots, remember, are the first show that someone puts on, the very first episode they're going to show to the producers to see if they're going to be able to say, oh yeah, do that show. They start with either a premise or a non-premise. Premise means that they have a beginning. So it's not dropped into the action. It's like, here's this world that is set up at the beginning of it. Like, for instance, in Breaking Bad, the main character, he finds out that he has cancer, and that is what sort of propels the whole rest of the show into action. The fact that he starts to sell meth or whatever is because he's lost his, he's got to have some money to provide for his family if he dies and so forth. As opposed to non-premise, where it's just sort of dropped in. You don't know where the action started, like in The Office. It just opens up, you're in an office. It's another day in the office. It's like every other day in the office. And if you think about it, this episode could be episode 5 or 50. It doesn't matter. Networks a lot of times will say they don't want premise plot, so they don't want you to write something that is the beginning of something. They want you to sort of drop into the action. But a lot of times they pick those up too, even though they say they don't want one. All right, so in order to describe the show, define the show, this is how you would do it. You would give a description of the show. It would be the format, plus the type, plus the genre, plus is it premise or non-premise. So for instance, Breaking Bad is a 1 hour, that's the format. Serialized, that's the type. Genre is crime drama, and it has a premise plot. So that's how you would describe it. That's how you would pitch it to the network. And a lot of times this is how it shows up on, like, say, Netflix. When you say, oh, do I want to watch this show? A lot of times it'll have these elements in there in a little bit more detail. So you might say Rick and Morty is half hour. That's the format. The type is it's animated. The genre is it's a situational comedy, and it has a non-premise pilot. So that's how you would describe it, and sort of like just down and dirty. This is what I need to know first and foremost about this show. Okay. So what we're going to be doing, what I challenge you to do, is to pick 3 shows that you've seen and sort of use this same format to define them. See if you can do that. Okay. And then we're going to create premises for our own show, and I'll get into that a little bit later. And I'm going to end the video here. That is basically the ins and outs of television.